Hear us? Good morning.
Morning.
Hello. Happy New
Oh,
Year.
good. We're live on YouTube, and I see many of our commissioners here. I see
Good
Commissioner
morning.
Burnham, Commissioner Thompson, Mr.
Morning,
Dorsett.
Mr. Dorsett.
How are you doing today?
Just fine. Fine.
Great
Glad to
news.
be alive and kicking.
It's always a blessing.
Indeed, indeed.
Well, I had hoped to be there in person today, but they made me stop taking my prednisone for 7 days before I have a medical test. I have to do an ultrasound on my temporal arteries to see if the arteritis is there, the giant cell stuff. So I'm exhausted.
Oh,
Oh, God.
My
Good
body is
morning.
in severe pain. So I.
oh,
it
Good
said I
morning,
was
Judge
coming
Howe.
today,
I
but
think
this
we're
morning I got
I
up
think
on
we're
the
live on
way I could
YouTube
do
just for
that.
everyone's
Right.
information.
Anyway.
This option.
Oh, they can't.
My brain still works.
Dr. Dow, you don't think anybody can hear us, but we are live on YouTube. Okay. Thanks. Good morning. Greetings from the Nancy Grasmick Building at the Maryland Higher Education Commission. We are here gathered for our monthly Maryland Higher Education Commission meeting. On behalf of all of us in person, we're going to have 4 commissioners in person, and I believe the other 7 are going to be online. We expect to have perfect commissioner attendance today. Just wanted to say good morning and Happy New Year. Here in person, we have Commissioner Thompson and Commissioner Warmack, and on the screen via Zoom, I think we have all of the rest of our commissioners. I see Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner Dukes, Commissioner Burnham, Commissioner Howe, Commissioner Robinson, Commissioner Tabor-Stalin, and we expect Commissioner Agu any minute in person. So we certainly have a quorum, and I think that in the next few minutes we will have all of our commissioners here. So good morning and Happy New Year to everybody. We will kick off the meeting with a call to order and remarks from me as chair and Dr. Rai, the acting secretary. A lot has happened in higher education since last we met in early December. As we expected, the federal government, the U.S. Department of Education, released a soft launch of the revised FAFSA in late December. There are still hiccups with the FAFSA that are being worked through by the federal government. There was an announcement as recently as yesterday that they're substantively changing some of the income requirements, allowing more students to be eligible. So I want to commend Mr. Dorsett, who's going to be presenting later, our Maryland Higher Education Commission Director of the Office of Student Financial Assistance. He's been working with students, answering questions. A lot of the questions really are related to the rollout on the federal side, but of course it affects many of our Maryland students. So Mr. Dorsett, we look forward to hearing from you later in the meeting about how things are going and the many things that you and your team here at MHEC are doing to adjust some of our deadlines and procedures because of the somewhat rocky federal rollout. I also want to note that with respect to things that have been happening in higher education since last we met, this past Friday, the legislative work group that was convened about a year ago, created by the legislature in the last legislative session to work on improving the academic program review process. The group on Friday had its final recommendations voted on by all of the work group members. This work group met over the summer into the fall for 5 months. It was a very committed group of professionals, including Dr. Rai and Dr. Dow representing MHEC. All of the higher education segment leaders were represented, and of course it was led by the legislature. So I want to give particular thanks to the co-chairs, Senator King and Delegate Smith, for leading the work group. There are 23 recommendations, all of them very solid, that I look forward to seeing the agency, Dr. Dow and Dr. Rai and their team implement, and they will be reporting back to us as a commission over the next weeks and months. But I think that the agency is well positioned under Dr. Rai's leadership to implement the recommendations. I think all of us on the commission, many of us are new. We're just entering our 7th month of being commissioners. We were not present, nor was Dr. Rai when the work group was created. But I think all of us are embracing a spirit of transparency, consistency, and of course fairness as MHEC continues to strive to be a student-centered agency. This agency exists because of the students of Maryland, and these 23 recommendations of the work group, I think, will go a long way to advancing improved opportunities for Maryland students. So Dr. Rai and Dr. Dow, on behalf of all of us in the commission, thank you for your work on the work group, and to the legislature, and particularly Delegate Smith and Senator King, the co-chairs, thank you for your leadership of the work group. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Rai for his opening remarks. I did want to note that Dr. Rai recently lost his mother, who passed away in India. Dr. Rai actually just returned from India yesterday and is back in Maryland for this meeting and for some budget meetings tomorrow in Annapolis. He will be returning to India, but just wanted to pass on our deepest condolences, and also really admire your commitment to the work, coming back to Maryland just for a couple of days for these meetings. So, Dr. Rai, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Martz, and thank you to everyone who have sent notes of condolences and sympathy, including Governor Moore and Lieutenant Governor Miller. I received their calls when I was in India. Very, very thankful to all my colleagues at MHEC, very supportive colleagues. During my absence for a few days, they took care of things. So I'm very, very thankful to them. Today's meeting, we have very rich agenda. It's not just the quantity of items, but the quality of items. Items like transfer pathways, academic program approval process, financial aid, student success data from different institutions. This all indicate that progress is being made in Maryland. Every day, institutions of higher education, in collaboration with our agency, our staff, I see progress here. and we want to continue to make those progress. So, Chair Marks, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Rai. We do have a rich agenda, as the Secretary said, so we will turn to any public comments. I don't believe there are any today. I'm hearing no. Moving along to approval of the minutes. We have 3 different sets of minutes to approve. The first are the minutes from our September 13th, 2023 meeting. They were included in the packet that the commissioners received in advance. Do I have a motion to approve the September 13, 2023 minutes?
Madam
So
Chair, I
moved.
move
Thank
that
you.
the-
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
nays or abstentions?
Okay.
All right, the ayes have it. The September 13 minutes are approved. I think we separately need to approve the September 13th closed session meeting minutes. Do I have a motion for that, for the approval of those minutes?
I
So
so move.
moved.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Any
Aye.
nays? Any nays or abstentions? All right. And then finally, our minutes from October 25th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right, thank you. Our next agenda item focuses on MHEC's Department of Finance and Administration, Mr. Jeffrey Newman. We can hear you in person. I'm not sure your microphone is on.
Can you hear me?
We hear him now.
All right, I'll move over a little bit.
And before you start, sir, I just wanted to note for the record that we have 100% attendance. We have 4 commissioners present in person and 7 virtually present. So thank you to my fellow commissioners. This is a strong showing of your public service, and we appreciate your attendance. Thank you, sir. You have the floor.
Okay, for the record, I am not Jeffrey Newman. My name is Dan Schuster. I'm the Capital Finance Analyst here at MHEC and also the Program Administrator for the Community College Construction Grant Program. And the item I have today is an informational item related to that program, which of course is the vehicle through which the state provides aid to capital projects at community colleges. And that program is governed in statute and administered through MHEC. And one of the aspects of that program is that each of the capital projects requires the state pay a portion and locally a portion is paid. And the amount that is paid by the state, the percentage, is also set in statute. And the way that it's done is basically using the same methods that MSDE uses to figure out the percentage of state aid for K through 12 schools. And they have what's called the foundation program, which is the amount that the K through 12 schools should get annually based on enrollment. And they go ahead and calculate how much of that foundation program should be paid for by the state, using factors such as income, personal income, property values, and so forth. And it's reset annually based on current data. And so basically the way that our program works is they take the percentage of that the state pays toward that foundation program and use that same percentage to determine how much the state is going to pay for capital projects at community colleges, with a couple of exceptions. Our program, the lowest amount that the state can pay is 50% of a project. And so if that MSDE calculation comes to be less than 50%, we adjust that up a little bit. And 50% is what we pay for the capital projects at those counties. The other exception is for regional community colleges, which are colleges that are sponsored by more than one county. The statute says that the state aid is always 75% for those, and that's basically an incentive for the smaller counties to sponsor one school instead of having a bunch of smaller ones spread out. So if you turn to page 2 of my memo, which I believe is page 13 of the commission book, you can see the percentages that are set for FY26 for the 15 community colleges. As a reminder, Baltimore City Community College does not participate in this program because they're a state agency and the state pays 100% of their projects. And so this is the percent that will be for projects that received their initial funding in FY26. As you know, capital projects often are funded over several years, and so if a project receives funding for the first time in FY26, these will be the percentages for that project, and it'll carry through for the life of the project. The reason why we are setting this now is because colleges have to get their requests into us by July of this year, and in that request they also have to submit letters of intent from the counties basically saying that they have local support lined up. And so in the months between now and then, that's when they're approaching their counties, making sure they're lining up all the local support that they need, and they have to know how much they have to ask for, and that's why we set the percentages now. As I say, this is all set in statute. It's an informational item that we typically just present to you guys before we disseminate it out to the colleges. And so with that, I'll conclude my remarks unless you all have any questions.
Do any commissioners have any questions? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Schuster.
Thank you.
The next item is from Mr. Al Dorsett, the hardest working man in state government, the leader of MHEC's Office of Student Financial Assistance. Mr. Dorsett, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Secretary, Madam Chair, as well as commissioners. As Madam Chair indicated, the FAFSA has rolled out for the upcoming 24-25 academic year. Many complications that the federal government is going through. They have a website with a list of different issues that they're facing and working to resolve those issues. To give an example of one of those issues, they found that individuals that are grad students are receiving a Pell flag on their FAFSA, in which grad students aren't eligible for Pell. So that is one error, one issue that they're facing. Luckily, we at MHEC are able to work around that, where as we receive students' FAFSA, we look at several requirements for a student to be eligible for a GA or EA grant, which includes that the student has to be in an undergrad program. So I'm hoping that I can, as I share my screen, everybody will be able to see it, because one thing that I love to say that we are pushing out is the MHEC One app. The MHEC One app is a new application for Maryland financial assistance programs that will allow all students to apply for all programs in one application, as well as replaces the miss for the Maryland State Financial Aid application by including a section for undocumented students that are eligible for state aid to apply. So with that, I'll share my screen. And hopefully everybody can see my screen. Here I just start with our MHEC website, where students can easily select. The first part is need money for college, start here. And with that, it takes individuals to the MHEC website that lists all our different programs, but also has the Maryland College Aid Processing System and DCAP's login. So what I've done is preparing for the future. I've created an account for my 15-year-old son because it's always good to prepare early for the future. So as a student logs in, you will see that they will see the new MHEC One app, and we are working to put some additional information there, just letting individuals know that it replaces the miss when students can apply for all programs. But the look and feel is totally different. When you look at the current MDCAP system, which is an antiquated system that we are working on the RFP to replace that system, you see kind of the look and feel of it. As you open up, or as a student opens up the MHEC One app, you see a totally different look and feel based off the current servicer Interclips, what they have worked with us to develop. So with this, the individual opens up the MHEC One app. We have information on there indicating our deadlines for students to complete the FAFSA, that there is a section for undocumented students. Here's a link for students to look at all our different programs if they want additional information on our programs, but kind of where the student can kind of move forward after reading this, and we definitely want the student to read. So we've asked, put in there red, wait, please read below before moving forward. With that, many of the information that the student initially used to create their MDCAPS account is already imported in. Don't worry about the social. That is a big number that I've put in for my son. I'll correct it at a different point in time. But here the individual can put their information. If an individual does not put certain information, it will mark it red saying that, hey, we can't move forward before you put this information. So in our case, because I'm not going to fully go forward and submit the application, I'm going to put just our current location. And then here it will ask if the individual, and let me actually see if I can increase this just a little bit so individuals can see better. Here we'll ask certain questions like, has the individual relocated to Maryland within the past 12 months as a result of base realignment? I'm going to say no. Has the individual been on active duty in Maryland? These are all aspects of residency. Is the individual eligible for in-state tuition? Is the individual, or will the individual be attending a Maryland institution? Now, what I will show you real quick is that if the individual says that they're not eligible for in-state tuition, or they will not be attending a Maryland institution, as the individual moves forward, they will only see programs in which an individual is eligible for that does not meet those requirements. So it is a smart logic type of application in which the students, what answers the student puts determines the next questions that come up. But for our purposes, I am going to indicate that I am eligible. So as you see, more programs show up. Now this application shows the programs that are open at this point in time. The application allows the individual to complete it, but if they want to go back because the program is open up at a later point in time, they can go back and update the application and we will receive the updated information. As you will see, we have a section where individual says they're not eligible to file a FAFSA, undocumented student, and want to be considered for the EAGA or Promise Award, in which that individual can select. If that individual has completed a FAFSA and they are not looking to apply for any other program but EAGA or Promise, that individual does not need to do this application, and we have identified that to them. However, we also identified that the student can apply for several other programs in which the individual can select, and as being a smart logic script, the questions that will come on the remainder of the application will be focused to eligibility questions for those programs that the student has selected that they are interested in. But for our purposes, I'm going to select that I'm an undocumented student and I want to apply for the EAGA or Promise.
Mr. Dorsett, I think we have a question from Commissioner Serrano.
Sure.
Yeah, just a quick question. So on do the parents, is there any part of the application that the parents have to fill out?
No, so there is no part of the application that parents have to fill out. For an individual that is a dependent individual, what happens is the parent information is there for the parents to work with the student to fill out, or the parents can jump in the seat for the student and fill out that information. Once the student completes the application, we will have a requirement of a signature page for the parents, which is a fillable form with electronic signature that the student can upload from their MDCAP system. They can have the parents sign it and then load the form back up.
Would the parents have to put their social security number down?
Yes, within the system, they will have to put their information there.
So presumably, if like a student is like legal and their parents are undocumented, how would that work?
So when you have an individual that is legal and their parents are undocumented, we will still move forward with the individual putting, I believe, a nines as the federal government used to do for their parents' information.
Okay.
Commissioner,
But remember now as well as for a undocumented student to be eligible for state aid, either the student or their parent must have filed taxes for the prior 3 years prior to them receiving an award. So if you have a legal student, well, in reality, if you have a student who is a citizen or a eligible non-citizen, that student is eligible to complete the FAFSA. So that student would not have to submit this information for that scenario.
I think we have two more questions. Commissioner Robinson and then Commissioner Warmack.
Hello, Commissioners. Good morning, everyone. I had a question about when you first started, you logged in and you said there's two options. One for those who choose to do in-state, or have a school that they're looking for in-state and more options apply. And then there's once you click that, then they have a select amount of options that are available. Now, what about those students who not necessarily have received their admissions letter or acceptance letters for those schools that they're applying to outside of Maryland, but they're also applying to Maryland? So how would that work if they're looking at both institutions outside of Maryland and within Maryland?
So this right here is just looking at, is the student eligible for programs as a resident, right? So it's looking at, are you eligible for in-state tuition? Regardless if you will be attending a institution in state or out of state, you're still eligible for in-state tuition. In regards to, are you attending a Maryland institution in the current upcoming year, if that individual indicates yes, and hopefully they're interested, so they will say yes. But if they say no, it would only put other programs. With that, again, this is always tweaking. So as we look at it, we can change that wording on there so that individuals will have a better understanding and move forward. So that feedback is very important.
So if they don't know and they change their mind, how would they go in? They will go in and change it again?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, because that individual does have the opportunity to go back and update the applications at any point in time.
Okay. Thank you.
And I believe we had one more question.
Let's see if I can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Dorsett, for a great presentation and a wonderful app. Just curious, how are the students finding out about that app? Are they working with their counselor? Are we sending this to eligible students? Is it driven from the FAFSA? How do they receive the information that this is available to them?
So that's where I'm going into next.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
So we're already doing a press release. We've done some news interviews. We're also working with our communications and outreach team to inform individuals about this. We're scheduling a session with the nonprofit organizations that are part of the Next Generation Scholarship Program, as well as reaching out to other nonprofit organizations to inform individuals. And then we're working with the Maryland State Department of Education to inform individuals of this as well. So we're looking at every strategic opportunity to identify this opportunity to students. Even when we look at social media, we have a social media campaign that we're pushing out to inform students as well.
And thank you very much. And also, what's the maximum eligible? So my assumption is they can apply for multiple what I call grants under this program. What's the maximum that they would be eligible for, or is there a maximum amount?
Amount. So the maximum amount is based off the cost of attendance of UMBC, I believe. Not going over that amount. Last time we checked, it was at $27,000 that a student can receive maximum and multiple scholarships. Of course, as tuition or fees go up, that maximum amount may increase. And that's the aspect of them receiving multiple different scholarships.
Is that the lifetime amount, or is that just each academic year?
That's an annual basis.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Dorsett, a related question. This is Cassie Motz. Related question about getting the word out to students and families and counselors. I know that I saw a press release go out just this morning. Does that mean that this one app is live now as we speak?
Oh, yes. This account that I created for my son is a live account.
Okay. So there have been a lot of... Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Go ahead.
This is ready, and we're already working with the vendor to get a report on how many students have actually already moved forward and completed.
So there have been a lot of questions in the community about the MSFA, the Maryland State Financial Aid application for students who aren't eligible for the Pell, namely undocumented students. So the answer to that question is there's no more MSFA. You now apply for the MSFA money. What used to be the MSFA, the money for undocumented students through the DREAM Act, is through this one app that is live now. And so we should be directing students and families and counselors who are interested in the MSFA to this one app. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So right here, we'll kind of see that these are questions that guide the individual to indicate if they're eligible for the eligibility as an undocumented student. The key that we really have right here is prior to us introducing the MHEC One app and having the MSFA used to stop students if they did not meet the guidelines of being eligible for in-state tuition. So if an individual identified that they did not, or their parents did not file taxes for 3 years, the application would say, stop, you can't move forward, you don't qualify. What we wanted to be able is allow students to still move forward so that we could run reports on how many individuals completed the application as undocumented students, but unfortunately were not eligible based off the state guidelines to provide reporting for future. So right here, these eligibility identifies if the student or parent filed taxes. If they indicate yes, then it moves forward to asking them additional information. If they indicate no, it moves them forward to the signature. It identifies to them after that through their email that they received we received their MHEC One app, and they can check on MDCAP's their status. And then under each program that they applied for, it would indicate that they are not eligible and why they are not eligible because they don't meet those guidelines. Again, the purpose of that is really being able to provide how many undocumented students are not meeting our guidelines to be eligible for state aid because they're not eligible for in-state residency based off the legislative provisions. So as a smart app, depending on the questions that the student has, you will see that you have required or not required. It will jump over certain sections based off that to make the application very easy and able for the student to smoothly move forward with the information. So there, I'll conclude because I don't want to take everybody through the whole app of trying to answer all the questions in that, but I'll open up to any additional questions that anybody may have.
Mr. Dorsett, it's Craig Williams. Thank you so much. This is an amazing step forward, and really appreciate the hard work of yourself and the commission to launch it. Just a couple of questions. I think I saw the press release this morning. Is the aggregate number of scholarship money available? Did I see 130 million? Or could you please clarify that?
So the 130 million is overall, and it's really a little bit over, but it's the overall of all scholarships that MHEC manages, at least with by the Office of Student Financial Assistance. When it comes to the Howard P. Rawlings program, the proposed budget for FY25, I believe, is 114 million.
Great. Thank you. And then in the income eligibility section of the app, does it pull in personal income tax information like the FAFSA does, or is it simply you write in the detail yourself?
You write in the detail yourself. So based off that, we will have a certain percentage of students that complete the MHEC One app that are ineligible to complete the FAFSA selected for verification. It'll be a small percentage just to make sure that the information being provided is correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think Commissioner Tabor Stalen and then Commissioner Thompson.
Commissioner Howe had her
Oh,
hand.
Commissioner Howe. I'm sorry. I can't see the screen very well from where I'm sitting. Commissioner Howe.
All right, do you have any notion of how many applications will be filed and what percent of the applicants will be receiving money?
Not yet. We will be able to get that information once we move forward and more individuals complete the application. That's the beautiful thing about having an application and the individuals that are able to still complete it, even if they're not eligible, because we'll be able to see the total amount of students that completed the MHEC 1 app as a undocumented student that was not eligible to complete the FAFSA, and how many of them actually were awarded.
All right, thank you. And it was a really wonderful presentation, and I thank you for it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes. Mr. Dorsett, thanks to you and your team for a great product. It's something that we really could use in the state of Maryland and probably could be a model for other places. I wanted to know, similar to Commissioner Howe, in the past, what's the approximate number of students or families that have applied?
For the past 3 years, based off our records, we looked at about 900 applications. With those 900 applications, unfortunately, we weren't able to correlate the data yet of who received aid and who did not receive aid with those applications. So we are working on that as well to get kind of that history so that we can compare it to current and what's going on current now.
So about 900 per year is what you had.
Yes.
I'm sure that number will go up because it seems to be a very easy application that people can use. So I'm looking forward to hearing all of the buzz about it, especially on social media and as it gets disseminated through the communities. Thanks again.
Definitely, you're welcome. And let me add, the good thing about it is many students that did the even mitzvah indicated that they were unaware of other programs that we had. So this allows students not only to complete the eligibility as an undocumented student, but also see other programs that MHEC has that they may be eligible to receive.
Yes, thanks again.
Was there another question? Did Commissioner Tabor Stalen, did you have a question? It's a little hard for me to see the screen, so I apologize. Anybody else online? Any of our commissioners have any questions? No? Okay.
No
Commissioner
questions.
Did I hear a voice?
Okay.
Mr. Dorsett, thank you so much for the presentation. Two very basic questions. One, this application that I'm seeing right now, is it only available through a browser, or is there also a mobile app version?
Unfortunately, the current system does not allow for a mobile app version right now.
And that's totally fine. I haven't had a chance to try and look at it on a phone. My gut is, if you had a good designer, it's kind of application friendly. The other question, and you may not have this data, but even a ballpark would be helpful. So I've heard 900 applications in past.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of the eligible population do you think that is? Is it in terms of, is that 5%, is that 10%? I believe and I hope it will go up. I'm curious what that will be, because my instinct is the communications question that a number of commissioners have asked is really important, because my gut is that's far below the total universe of Maryland students who could take part.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's probably about between 5 and 10%.
Okay. Got it. That's helpful. Thank you so much, and thank you for the great work on this, that this is going to make a lot of students' lives easier. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Dorsett, I think the question on mobile app was an important one. Can you talk a little bit about our overall plan for changing the entire platform where some of the cloud-based technologies can be available? Can you talk about the RFP which is about to go out?
Sure. With the new RFP that's about to go out, we are looking for a servicer to come in, a company to come in to build really a futuristic system when you really look at it. My exposure with different systems such as Campus Logic, Aleutians, a colleague, DataTel, just so many different ones have really identified what we have the ability to really do. Not only a mobile platform for individuals, but a parent platform, just where we kind of follow what the FAFSA does, where parents can actually sign in and connect with the student's account, so that if there's things that parents need to do, they can go into their portal and submit that, and it all comes into one. I'm looking at expanding it where a student can see their cost of attendance for each different program, where a student can see the information that we have in the system from them submitting their FAFSA or their MHEC 1 app. So just across the board, where you have several portals for individuals to see information, more information. You have mobile platforms for students to be able to submit their documents online, to have a chat with individuals that are working on the different programs. So we are looking at having a chat, I guess, area or variable in there that individuals can chat directly with us that are managing their programs to get better assistance with their application and with their awards.
My mic to work. Mr. Dorsett, just one more quick question. Just remind me again. I know you told us this several months ago, but what's the amount of money that has been allocated to students through this through the total grant program, right? So, yeah.
So the total program, it was 112 million, with 2 million of that going to the campus-based educational assistance grant that we give out to the campuses. So money being awarded directly to students through MHEC was 110 million. The recent budget proposed, I believe, takes it up to 114 million. Okay. There is also a group, there's a study group for the Howard P. Rawlings program based off House Bill 923 that was passed during 2023 legislative session. That's really looking at the legislation and really going through to provide some comments, suggestions that we can share with legislation of concerns that we see within the current provisions of the program.
Thank you, Mr. Dur. Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate the update on the information and the new additional resources for students. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from commissioners? Well, I want to join my fellow commissioners in thanking you, and I think that you get for the gist of our questions. We're extremely excited about this one app that is not a phone app yet, but online, and we're very interested in making sure that the word gets out to students and families and counselors, and we appreciate your outreach efforts. You and I have talked offline about outreach efforts, and I know you and the communications team, I see Mr. Coley here in the room, have a plan to really get the word out. So if there's anything we as a commission can do to help you with that or to coordinate with other state agencies, please let us know, because this is a tool that everybody should have access to. Before you leave us, if you could just talk a little bit about what MHEC is doing to allay students' concerns with respect to the bumpy federal rollout. I know we as a commission voted at our last hearing in December to allow MHEC to push back some state deadlines. If you could just talk a little bit about that, remind folks who may be watching online about the relaxation of the deadlines and how that's going to be helping students, again, in an effort to be as student-focused as possible.
Sure. Understanding with all the kind of bumps and obstacles that students and families are facing with the recent changes of the FAFSA, MHEC, with the approval of Maryland and support of Maryland, has pushed back the deadline date for individuals to complete the free application for federal student aid or the MHEC 1 app and be eligible or be considered eligible for the Howard P. Rawlings program to June 1. So with June 1, it gives individuals, it really really kind of pushes out that 6-month time frame that was really there for individuals when they could do the FAFSA October 1st prior. Additionally, what we've done is we're training the staff on actually going through the FAFSA and completing the FAFSA themselves, so that as students and parents call, we could assist them with those different questions. We also are taking the information from the federal government about different issues that they're facing and doing updates, working with our communications department to update that on our website so individuals see what's going on and how the federal government is resolving those issues to keep them aware.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you to you and your team for all you do. Dr. Dukes, Commissioner Dukes has a question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks again, as everyone has said. I want to echo the work that's been done in this area. So could you talk about, Mr. Dorsett, is there a role for the financial aid offices at our local institutions to play? And how do you ensure that in the areas where necessary, that the remarks, the questions, the answers to questions are the same? So they're not hearing different messages based on, the need to make sure that we're articulating the same or a similar message, even though we understand there may be some distinct differences among types of institutions.
So definitely, we're working with the FACT committee in exploring, what issues that are being faced by the federal government right now when institutions are looking at packaging students. Institutions, of course, package students with financial aid at different times. Everybody's kind of waiting for the federal government to release the students' institutional student information records, what we call ISERs. And as they start releasing those are other discussions that the institutions and MHEC are having. Also identify, even with the MHEC One app, how institutions can also promote the MHEC One app for students to complete, putting it on their web pages, providing information to students, letting them know that it's open, letting them know that the deadline date has been pushed back to June 1st. So, that was one thing when we came back from the winter break. Definitely in our first FACT meeting that we had in January, we went over the change in the deadline. We gave them a review of the MHEC One app. We discussed the different things that are going on with the FAFSA and how we kind of connect and prepare for those different issues that are being faced right now. So it's definitely a collaboration between us and the institutions, as well as us and MSDE and just overall throughout Maryland, as much as we collaborate, saying the same message to individuals.
Right. And I would also think entities that our own chair is involved with, those nonprofit organizations that sit in communities, that just to make sure that the talking points are out there and that we're all talking from, the same direction, yes. Et cetera. Because I do agree that I think the number of applications will increase, and especially as you've looked at sort of being flexible with deadline dates, given the situation in which we find ourselves. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Commissioner Serrano, question.
Yeah, there was some talk about like the inflation adjustment at the federal level, and that was kind of being factored in. Where is the Department of Education on that one? And are they still considering that, or?
So I think at this point in time, they worked out their formula of, how they calculate a student aid index for any additional adjustments. They would look to do that in the next upcoming years, just because they're having the complications that they're having now with the current application and individuals being able to complete that. Really, they looked at the aspect of, they increased the amount, I believe they budgeted about $14 billion of funds for students to complete the FAFSA and be eligible for the Pell Grant. So they're looking at having enough funds right there, but as far as any adjustments in the calculation, they've held off on that. And, if anything, they'll look to do it in the future, not right now.
Uh-huh. And then the other question I have is, so the new form, like it would require both parents to fill out their sections for their contribution?
So the new form looks at the aspect of both parents, whether they have a joint tax return or they have a individual tax returns, combining their information and putting it into the form. So it's really them getting together and seeing it and saying, okay, well, if we have a joint return, we give them the numbers on the tax return or the locations of where each information is, and they put that information. We indicate on there if they have separate returns that they should combine those numbers together to put that information there. So whether it's adjusted gross income, whether it's taxes paid, they would put the information together from both of their returns.
Okay, and then the last question I have.
No, no problem.
So you have, say, hypothetically, you have you have a divorced family. So you have either kind of single parent household, maybe the dad or the mom still kind of the picture. They both have to fill out this form for the child to move forward?
No, we follow the same example of the FAFSA. So unless a student, so the FAFSA requires, just like us, if a student's both biological parents, if they're unmarried but they live in the same household, then yes, both of them have to put in their information. However, if the parents are divorced or separated and the student lives with one parent, then the parent that the student identifies that provides support for that student puts in their information. Now, if that parent is remarried, then that parent and their spouse would put in their information. So it's all based off that student's specific situation.
Okay. And then the final question. Mixed status household. So you have a family that maybe one parent is undocumented or maybe both parents are undocumented. On the form, does it state that this information that you're providing here will solely be used for this? It's not going to be used for any other.
Yes. And again, remember, this is for undocumented students. It's not, if the parents are undocumented, then yes, they need to meet the requirements, or the student needs to meet the requirements in order to be eligible for state aid. But really the key is, if you have a student that is a eligible citizen or eligible non-citizen, that student is going to go and complete the FAFSA. And their parents are going to use the FAFSA, where the FAFSA has now, even though they're running into complications, that undocumented individuals now can get a ID to be able to sign the FAFSA. This is more so on undocumented students, that parents are undocumented as well. As long as those parents have done a tax return or eligible to do a tax return, then that student would put their information in. If that student indicates that neither of my parents have filed a tax return, it's not going to ask them for that additional information. It's going to move them forward, because in reality, those individuals would not be eligible based off the current state legislative provisions.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Commissioner Tabor-Stalen.
Thank you. Do have a question this time. I'm curious if you have any software where you're able to see what is happening when folks are going through the process. I know at our organization, we're able to see at a back end where people are getting tripped up, how much time they're spending on different areas. And even just now, I was playing around myself, and it feels like there are a few errors I'd love to be able to report. So would love to understand how you are catching errors, and then if there's a way for us to support in that usability testing.
So currently, that is something we can look into. Based off our current system, it's very hard. Even though this is a new look and a new feel, it still relates and connects with that system. So we are asking the vendor to see if there's any type of reporting that can come back on individuals and how long they spend that much time on there. If individuals stop completing it, we're waiting to hear back from the vendor. They really pushed, and we pushed them hard to really have this ready. So they're just now settling down and getting to that next aspect. So again, that is something that I could follow up with the commission on, to see what our vendor can do or has done for us, and see what reports I can provide to the commission about that.
Okay, and I think if that's where we can provide that cover, that the commission is very interested in seeing time on page, error reports. As an example, it appears you actually have to put in a social security number right now. The instructions to put in zeros it appears that if you do so, someone has already done it, and it says that that record already exists. So we'll definitely want to fix that right away, that you don't need a social security number.
Okay, so you did the zeros or nines?
It says to do zeros, and it doesn't
Okay.
say how many zeros. And then when you do, it says someone has already applied with that social security number of all zeros, and so you can't move forward. So that's, and
Okay.
I'm not in any way. I run a technology company. I know how difficult these rollouts are, and when you move with speed, you have
Yeah.
these errors. But I think we all want folks to have as good an experience as possible, and just want to make sure that we are doing error testing rapidly.
Yeah, no problem. We definitely are. So thank you for that, and I'll definitely put that in immediately with the vendor so that we can work that out.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Serrano.
All right, this might tie into a later presentation, but I think on the on family income, would it be possible, since now that we're getting parents reporting how much they were making or how much they could contribute, would it be possible to develop a metric that we could say the tuition as a percentage of family income now that we have this being a part of the application?
So when you say the tuition is a percentage of family income, you're looking at what the family income is compared to the tuition. I'm just making sure I'm clear on what you're asking. What the tuition is, what the family income is, and what percentage of that tuition is compared to the family income, correct?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, and we could so basically from here on out, we could monitor like the financial kind of the the ability of a student to be able to pay for their schooling, and then monitor whether they're graduating on time or so forth, right?
So graduation on time, I don't have those numbers in regards to when an individual actually graduates. I have the number of payments a student has received, which would be kind of an overall. I think that's something that we could talk with MHEC's research department and see, where we can correlate that or what information we have to make those connections.
Okay, cool.
Commissioner Burnham.
Thank you. Good morning. I really appreciate the presentation as well, Mr. Dorsett. I want to make sure that I still have an overall view of the forest, in addition to the rather detailed look we've had at a lot of these issues. Am I to understand that a Maryland student who's getting ready to go to college now can go to the MHEC One app and complete that, and the data that the student puts into that flows to both Maryland aid applications as well as the federal financial aid?
No,
Okay.
it's still separate. So
They will have to do two then.
no, so it all depends. If you have a Maryland student that is eligible to complete a FAFSA, that student can complete the FAFSA, and automatically when we receive that FAFSA, that student will be reviewed for eligibility for the Howard P. Rawlings program as well as the Promise program, depending on if that student identifies that they'll be attending the community college. Okay. So the federal government covers that.
All right.
So you do a FAFSA, you're reviewed for federal aid, and you're reviewed for state aid as long as you're a Maryland resident and you list a Maryland institution on your FAFSA, because that's the only way that the federal government will give us a copy of that student's FAFSA record.
Okay.
If you are eligible for to fill out a FAFSA and you want to apply for additional programs, then that student would go on the MHEC One app and select any and all of the additional programs outside of the Howard P. Rawlings and the Promise that they want to apply for. So the firefighters program, cybersecurity, police officer scholarship, so on and so forth, that they can apply.
All right. Thanks for that clarification.
You're welcome.
And just to add, again, for our undocumented students, if you're not eligible for the FAFSA, the One app is the only way to get the DREAM Act money for undocumented students. Formerly, you'd use the MSFA. The MSFA is no more. It's now the One app.
Yes.
Correct? Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Dorsett. You can tell there's a lot of interest and enthusiasm about the work of you and your team. We really appreciate all that you've done and continue to do. I know it's going to be a busy season, but thanks for being here and for your presentation today.
Thank you, and thank you for your support.
We'll next turn to the Department of Academic Affairs, Dr. Dow.
Good morning. Nope. Oh, good morning, Chair, and good morning, Commissioners. Thank you. I am going to turn the time over to our Director of Academic Affairs, Trish Gordon-McCown. She will provide updates. You have biannual reports in your commission book, and we will provide just some broad numbers of recent approvals. So I turn the time over, and I will pull up your slide deck.
Thank you. Okay, I think I understand why everybody struggles. There's a... Okay. No. Hello?
Yep. Good.
You can hear me? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Again, I am Trish Gordon-McCown. I'm the Director of Academic Affairs at the Commission. Good morning, Commissioners, Dr. Rye. I am presenting the biennial reports. Just as a reminder, the report covers a 6-month period. This particular period is from July 1st to December 31st of 2023. There are 4 total reports, so we'll start with the private career school report. That team is our Career and Workforce Education Unit, and they currently have a FTE of 5 individuals. Okay, that's all right. So for the private career school report that you have there, a brief summary is that for this review period, we had 3 new private career school applicants. They're listed there for you: a Maryland Electrolysis, Pro Plus Skin Academy, and Metasage, which is an aesthetics, has an aesthetics program. There were 3 approvals withdrawn as a result of closures. Those approvals that were withdrawn are VIP Dental and the Accounting and Bookkeeping Center. Both of those were due to low enrollment. And the Maryland Bartending Academy, which was a recent closure as a result of, they've been in business for many decades, and the owner decided to retire. There are a total of 127 training provider questionnaires. Just as a reminder, the training provider questionnaires are the initial application. We loosely use the word application. It's an inquiry that the entity submits to determine if they require approval from the Secretary to operate. So we had 40 not exempt. Those are examples of entities that are required to have approval by the Secretary to operate. We had 10 exemptions and 77 not regulated. We have an upcoming workshop. That comment there relates to every quarter we hold workshops for entities that are thinking about proposing new training programs, operating new schools. So the team will host quarterly new applicant workshops. They go over the entire process and give the applicants a chance to ask questions. So that's a 2-hour workshop every quarter. If you don't mind, can we do questions at the end of the 4th report?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. All right, for our next report, it covers our degree granting institutions under our institution review unit. That unit currently has an FTE of 6 individuals. In that unit, we currently have new degree granting in-state institutions that are in process for new institution approvals. 1 is in stage 1, and we have 3 in stage 2. We also have out-of-state institutions seeking to operate in Maryland, 10 initial applications, and 6 renewals. For the degree granting institutions that are seeking a religious exemption, we have 5 initial applications and 5 renewal during the review period. Okay. It's okay. We'll just keep going. There we go. Okay. I should have reminded you in the packet. I know we're probably about page 29, if that helps you. And I will go back if you need me to repeat anything. Also, for our degree granting institutions, under our institution review unit, they process applications for institutions that participate in NC-SARA. Just as a reminder, that is the National Council for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreements. Those are institutions that have agreed to enter into this agreement to make the application process easier for entities that are offering education across various states, so they don't have to submit multiple applications. Just as a summary for the NC-SARA applicants, there were a little over 6,300 Maryland residents and 1,345 approved online programs at out-of-state institutions. For our non-NC-SARA institutions, there are 10 out-of-state institutions with Maryland students that are participating in distance education. That is our online registration process. Those are individuals participating in fully online programs. We also have 16 Maryland institutions participating in NC-SARA. Those are Maryland institutions that are in SARA, and they're offering online programs to students outside of Maryland. Okay. And for our degree granting institutions, the next report is for our academic program review. Academic program review has an FTE of 10 individuals. That is our newly formed unit, and there were 6 program proposals with objections. Out of those objections, we had 2 of our institutions, hold on, let me give you exact numbers. And I apologize for the quick overview. We had 2 of our objections that ended in recommended for approval, and 1 that ended in a denial, and 3 that were withdrawn. Out of our new academic programs, we had 9 lower division certificates, 9 associate degrees, 5 upper division, 3 bachelor's, 6 post-baccalaureate certificates, 5 master's certificates, 3 doctorals, and 16 new areas of concentrations. The report covers 13 substantial modifications and a total of 121 non-substantial modifications. And out of that number, a large percentage of them were discontinuations. Our final report is on our state approving agency for veterans education and training benefits. That is our VA unit that handles the process for institutions that want to offer veterans education and training benefits for the active duty veterans and for their dependents. There were a total of 660 program actions. The other 270 are additional applications or program actions related after the initial approval. And there are, for facility visits, there were 8 risk-based surveys. The unit is responsible for 20 for the year. For this review period, it was 8. And just for clarification, the state approving agency operates under the federal fiscal year. So the federal fiscal year reports from October 1 to September 30. The report results that you're seeing here are for the final quarter because the unit is now going into their own 6-month or biennial reporting for the federal government. So the next report will align a little bit closer to our other reports. So this current report is for July 1st until September 30 of 23. There were 220 technical assistance visits. Those are emails, calls, and actually personal visits for institutions that are certifying our veterans. The unit also participated in 9 outreach and liaison activities. Those activities are related to state partners, our institutions, also affinity groups, and partnerships to help institutions to understand changes in federal government and the contractual requirements that the state approving agency has to abide by in order to meet the state's requirements. So there was a total of 1,167 actions for the quarter under the state approving agency for veterans education benefits. Okay, I apologize again for the fast review, but I do stop for questions or comments.
Any questions or comments from the commission? Dr. Dow, could you please put the screen back so we can see our fellow commissioners? Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Agu.
Sure. Good morning.
Good
and
morning.
Thank you for the presentation. On going back to the private career folks, just maybe a couple of just asks. One, and I should get this myself, but if we could get a copy of the questionnaire,
Absolutely.
that would be helpful. And this is a process question that I'm asking. So when folks are either approved or approved for renewal, I'm trying to figure out a way to ask this nicely. Is it purely have they gone? Is it a compliance exercise, or are we looking at as well kind of outcomes, meaning graduation rates, potentially, because these are very workforce-focused programs or folks getting employed? How does that factor into the analysis of either their approval or their renewal?
Well, procedurally for the renewal, looking at the outcomes is a factor. We really are focusing more and more on the compliance. Due to the pandemic and some of our institutions stumbling a little bit over the last few years, we've looked at the outcomes. We've seen a few decreases, but we're also trying to be sensitive to the restructuring and rebuilding of some of those institutions. So at this time, and also the team now is fully staffed.
Sure.
So we're very grateful for that. So the team now, actually today, is out on a compliance visit for our renewal. So their focus is on the compliance, essentially doing a mini version of the initial application to check on factors that the outcomes, the enrollment, documentation of the students. So they are really focusing on that. And they're working with those institutions when they see that institutions are struggling. Because in many cases, these individuals are not educators by trade. They're great at their craft. So the analysts are working with them through some of their deficits. And then when need be, we will pursue compliance actions to try not to have a school closure. But you can see on some of the reports that inevitably it will be a school closure, and we will look to protect the students at that point.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Other questions? All right.
Okay, so let me just offer a few comments. First of all, private career schools, some of them are doing outstanding work. Sure. A strong partnership in automotive industries like Tesla and others, and they are supported by those industries as well. Automotive, HVAC, welding, they are really contributing to the workforce development. I had an opportunity to visit at least few, and I will continue to visit more. The other thing, the NC-SARA, where we have these agreements where we allow Maryland residents to take online classes from institutions in other states. Same way, students from other states take classes from Maryland institutions. I'm always interested in knowing how many students from other states are taking classes at Maryland institutions, and certainly, some of our residents are taking classes at institutions outside Maryland. So can you show us the number and which one is greater?
Okay. So to answer your question, there were almost 38,000 out-of-state residents enrolled in online programs at Maryland institutions. And yes, it does go both ways, but let's see, we had 6,300.
1,345 or so.
We are, I'm so sorry. Is it?
It's okay. That's okay. Go ahead.
So we are bringing in more students to distance ed than exporting students to distance ed.
Not just more, significantly more, and I wanted commissioners and audience to make a note of it. So this agreement is good, and our institutions are competitive, and they're doing very, very good work.
Okay.
Can I ask one follow-up? Which makes those are great numbers to hear. How much of that is driven by UMGC? I imagine the vast majority, but I just wanted to ask and make sure.
Yes, they are a big contributor. We don't have the numbers actually by institution. That was something we have to work with our research folks on.
Right, and we can pull that information.
That'd be great.
but
No,
yes.
I imagine, and it just shows how important UMGC is as an institution for us. Thank you.
Certainly, I also suspect that majority of these students are at UMGC, but you'll be surprised. Community colleges in Maryland are also bringing in students from other states, so it'll be nice to see this spread. I also want to thank Director Gordon McEwen. To her and her team, tremendous amount of work is done in that area, and we want to make sure that regulatory work and statutory work is being done right, so Maryland students are getting quality education through these institutions. Again, thank you to you and your team for this work.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to echo Dr. Rye's thanks, Ms. McCown. Excellent presentation, wonderful report. I think a lot of us on this commission read it in advance, and so the fact that you got so few questions shows how thorough the work was of you and your team. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the feedback, and I will definitely share that with the team. As I mentioned, most of them are staffing up, and we have a lot of new people that are stepping up and hitting the ground running. So I'm very thankful for my team because they are really doing a lot of good work. So thank you for the feedback.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda, we have an update on student transfer in Maryland. Dr. Dow.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to provide just some quick updates and then turn the time back over to Secretary Rye to provide some additional updates. We will soon release a request to the institutions to provide updated implementation plans. We'll probably give the institutions about 4 weeks to submit those plans, and so I plan to report back to you all on those implementation plans. In particular, we will be asking a question about challenges that institutions are facing in the implementation so that we can figure out how to best assist them, if further regulatory changes need to be made, if we need to do further guidance, and what those next steps look like. So implementation plans are forthcoming, and I'll report back either at the February or March, depending on timing, commission meeting of what that looks like on our campuses. The other item that we continue to work on internally is our data collection. We continue to spin our wheels a little bit on what that looks like, and we will be convening a work group, a small work group of institutional researchers, transfer coordinators, registrars, and possibly even students themselves to figure out how we make this collection meaningful, not just in terms of the simple requirement that institutions tell us when they've denied a course or credit, but what does that mean for policy? We want this to be an informative collection so that we can change things that are impacting our students. So those are the two big initiatives that we continue to undertake, and more to come as we get those implementation plans. We expect to make that request of institutions this week. With that, I will turn it over to Secretary Rye to provide some additional updates on transfer initiatives.
So thank you, Dr. Dow. Transfer is an important work. It's complicated work, but for our goals of completion, degree completion, completion with less debt or no debt, I think transfer is the key. So we are paying very, very serious attention to it. I'm excited to share that we are in discussions with Aspen Institute regarding a collection that will elevate transfer in the state of Maryland. The Aspen Institute approached me as soon as I came into this role as acting secretary. If we succeed, I think we are almost there. The collaboration will accomplish 3 goals. First, elevate transfer by creating a strategic council. Second, engage dyads or triads of institutions by developing plans and a seamless environment for students. Third, help our agency develop goals regarding transfer, both quantitative and qualitative. We want to make sure that the students who take classes at community colleges, those courses transfer, not only transfer, they should be counted as in their major, applied to their major, and then degree credit loss should be minimized. On average, students lose around 10 credits nationally after transfer. We want to make sure that number should be almost zero in the state of Maryland. And then a student's GPA after transfer. A student should be academically prepared to make sure that they succeed after transfer. I am very interested in understanding the loss of transfer, as I said, and also transfer students who are leaving state, students who are going out of state. We want to keep all students in Maryland, especially transfer students. Increasing STEM transfer pathways and providing support to students that start their higher education and career at a community college. Great investment in students. Affordability is important. And we want to make sure that things like dual admission for specific academic programs and tuition stability between community colleges and four-year institutions is important. Once a student transfers from community college to four-year institution, the tuition jumps up. We want to make sure how four-year education is also as affordable as a community college to our residents. I'm very excited about this partnership. As soon as the final MOU is signed, I'll happily inform you. Thank you.
Secretary Rye, thank you for that information, and I'm very well aware of the Aspen Institute. Can you just share a little bit more about the Aspen Institute and what their role would be? Are they providing resources? Are they partnering with you to get the data, or just a little, if you can?
Yeah. So Aspen Institute will be bringing national best practices.
Okay.
They will help. They will be helping us develop the success matrix for transfer institutions, and most importantly, Commissioner Wormack, they'll be providing financial resources to do this work.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Secretary Rye.
One question or comment. First of all, this is great. I've gotten to work with Aspen previously, and I'm glad that we're bringing them here to Maryland. One group of stakeholders that I might recommend including in this conversation, and it might seem odd, is actually some of the large SIS technology providers, the Ellucians of the world, because in the end, if we think about the data piece of this, not knowing what happens, right now we depend on people to send notes and emails that this student transferred and this one hasn't, and we know what the amount of students we're talking about. To the extent that this can be an automated process, and in the end, my gut is, if you were to look at all the base technology and infrastructure of most of our schools, it's like 3 or 4 vendors. It's actually not that many because it's a fairly consolidated market. There may be some opportunities to make that a lot easier and include some of those folks. And a lot of them are actually based in the national capital region. I think Lucian's in Northern Virginia, so on and so forth. So that might be you might already be talking to them, and if you are, you're usually ahead of me. But that might be a group of stakeholders to include in this process to help begin to make that part easier, so it's less work on the people and more on the machines.
I completely agree with you, Commissioner. Most of these companies are in National Capital Region. We would like them to be in Maryland. So,
well, we won't take it out of them for being in Virginia. We won't.
But you're true. But when you look at the technology, I think there's so much opportunity space for the technology to improve. Our issues that we face in transfer, I see the technology not being there at this point. It's an opportunity to develop the technology. I hope more startups and others who have grassroots understanding of these issues try to create technology that solves these problems. Not taking an existing technology and try to fit into this situation that often happens. So our conversation is around starting something from the grassroots level and really addressing the real issues.
Thank you. It's hard for me to see. Commissioner Thompson. question.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Dr. Rye.
Good morning.
One quick question. I know that we'll be urgently looking at the transfer credits for the students, but are we also going to be able to gather information regarding the financial impact? You mentioned earlier, we know that there's an increase from community college to 4-year, but will the institutions be able to share information in any way about what students applied for at their first institution versus transferred and received at the second institution? Or will there be a record that indicates, hey, when they were at the first institution, for example, they received X amount of dollars versus at the new institution? Just food for thought.
Thank you. Our first goal is to make sure that courses taken at community colleges are accepted and credits are transferred and applied to the academic program. If students have to receive 2 or 3 courses that they have already taken at community colleges, that adds to the financial burden to our students. So making sure that happens. Secondly, the tuition stability is a pretty serious issue. And I'll ask Dr. Dow to address the third part that you raised about data collection.
Sure. Thank you, Secretary Rye. Commissioner Thompson, we have some of that information. We have not done an explicit analysis as you have just described. We can look into that and see what that looks like and see what we can pull together for you. That would be a very interesting analysis to better understand the financial impact of our transfer students. In many ways, and I am talking out loud without my Director of Research and Policy Analysis here, we could possibly do kind of an analysis before the Transfer with Success Act and then an analysis after, and see if hopefully these new rules around accepting credits will have helped students, as Secretary Rye just implied, that students aren't having to take an extra semester of courses when they transfer because their courses will have applied to their program of study. So we can look into it. The short answer is we can look into it. We have some of that information, and I can report back to you.
Well, actually, I'm not looking for an answer now.
Okay.
I think as we move forward, that it be built in to the work that needs to be done. It may be a bit premature at this point to just pull something out, but you're going to have this strategic council just to make sure that it's part of the information that's on the table as the planning begins, as opposed to doing it after the fact. That was my point. Thank you so much, though. It's good information to know that things are moving forward.
Understood and noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Serrano.
Yeah, I guess my concern is more of a story that came out a few months ago, I guess probably December. It's from UMD's computer science department cutting back the number of transfer students from 1,000 to 100 per year. And I guess that kind of triggered a question for me, was like, what tools do we have, or what resources do we have to basically tell a university that, I mean, if our intentions are we want students to go from community college to a UMD, and this is a pipeline because we believe it's more kind of equitable and low cost for students, how do we make the case when the university just says, we don't want any transfer students, we want only our own students? Because that's basically what they've done. They've gone from 1,000 to 100, and they're basically not taking any more transfer students. So what resources do we have as MHEC to do that, to try to change up that, or to start a conversation to make the case that transfer students are great for a university?
So, and actually, can I put a slightly more pointed point on these questions, which is, what are the incentives or mandates that we can create that actually make that happen? There's, of course, the making the case, which I think Commissioner Serrano is talking about, but also what are the tools, because we believe this is in the academic and the state interest. So let me, Commissioner Serrano might be too polite to say it, but I'll say it. What are those tools that allow us to really incentivize institutions or push institutions to make this happen? And apologies for stepping on your question, but I thought it's a really important one.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, thank you. It's an important question. The issue there, as I understand, is the capacity issue. They have run out of rooms. They have run out of instructors. The program is nationally recognized. A lot of students are interested in. The freshman population has exponentially increased. So those are the challenges they're facing. And that's a good news for the state too, that one of our own program is sought after by students across the country. We will work with the university to see what can be done to increase the transfer students. UMD has accepted transfer students very happily in their engineering program, in this business program, and also in computer science program. Engineering school, Clark School of Engineering is ranked among top in the country for producing black engineers. And that happens because of the transfer students. Transfer students play a very significant role in that ranking. So I know university understands and appreciates the role of transfer students. We'll continue to work with them. But let me also tell you that the state of Maryland has other institutions with very high quality computer science program. Morgan State University, you have UMBC, and several others. So our students have option. They have other computer science programs are also accessible to them, but we'll continue to work with University of Maryland as well. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Dr. Dow? Oh, Dr. Dukes, Commissioner Dukes.
Right. So thank you, and thanks both to Commissioner Serrano and Commissioner Agoop for the questions that we're asking, and certainly the spin that you put on it. My question is really about how do we look at some of the really best practices that are occurring around the country with regard to transfer. Practices that Maryland, quite frankly, has been reluctant to adopt. Common course numbering, all of those things. And certainly in my role working in the community college, those were things that we have attempted to put forward for consideration for some time. I also think back to the transition reports, and some of us served on the particularly the higher education transition report. And there are a number of goals that we presented to the governor that really do require institutions to think differently, to be more innovative and transformative and collaborative as we think about Maryland and both a growing economy and a new economy. And much of that resides in the sciences and the STEM field. Whether we're talking about quantum, AI, all of those kinds of things. So I would encourage us as we continue to look at the state plan for higher education to also think about the mechanisms that will need to be in place in order to achieve the goals that have been set in education for the state of Maryland. So I think this is a great conversation to have. It's a good time to have it. And it may be an opportunity to invite in our higher education leaders to engage them in a conversation, a task force, an ad hoc committee to begin to look at these things much more in depthly and to determine and figure out how we can ensure that higher education K through 12, and certainly, as they say, 13 through 20 and beyond are available to our students, and that we eliminate as many barriers as that we possibly can and really understand why there have to be some barriers that remain in place.
I think those are excellent points, Commissioner Dukes, and you've put a lot of work into the work of the transition report higher education subcommittee as chair, and I think it's a good reminder to go and look and see what some of those recommendations were. And I really love the idea of an ad hoc committee or a task force on this topic. So Dr. Dow and Dr. Rye, let's be sure we follow up on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, our next agenda item is an overview of the recommendations by the Program Approval Process Legislative Work Group.
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to let Secretary Rye provide some open. Oh, okay, you want me to go into it? Okay. So in front of you, and I apologize for those joining virtually, there is a 4-page summary of the recommendations. This is pulled literally from the work group recommendation report. It just pulls out the specific recommendations. There are 8 sections. I'll go through the sections quickly. Operational missions, a second section regarding recommendations for the state plan of higher education and state workforce development needs. The third section speaks to recommendations regarding letters of intent before an institution submits a proposal. The fourth section is a recommendation regarding establishing a collaborative grant fund. The fifth section, which has, as you can imagine, the most amount of recommendations, is around the program approval objection process. The sixth section is a recommendation specific to distinguishing between unreasonable and unnecessary duplication. Seventh section is criteria for full program review of substantial modification, so a recommendation to consider revisions to that definition. And then the last section is some additional follow-up recommendations and next steps for the group. I won't go through these in detail unless you want me to, but I can assure you that we are looking at these recommendations. I have an implementation plan drafted to figure out when we need to do what. Many of the recommendations create new annual cyclical reports, things that will come before you as commissioners for review and approval. So we are, like I said, working through what that looks like over the next 3 to 4 years, really. The most imminent or kind of pressing need is there's a recommendation in here about collaboration with Department of Labor and Department of Commerce regarding identifying workforce needs. So we have had some initial conversations with those agencies to let them know that this recommendation is now out in the public. Both agencies are super excited about this endeavor. And I look forward to reporting out as we continue to consider how to implement and moving these things forward. And with that, I'll turn it over to Secretary Rye for some comments or answer questions.
Take questions first.
Okay.
Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you for the analysis and report. Some of this is going to turn into legislation, correct? And so do you envision all these pieces in legislation, or some you can actually begin acting on now? And for those that you can begin acting on now, what sort of resources will your team or MHEC be required to do to effectively and timely implement some of these changes?
Absolutely, thank you. That is my understanding, is that we will see a bill for some, but not all of these recommendations. Not all of them require statutory changes. Some of them are just things that our agency will do and continue to implement. So some of this is a little bit of wait and see to see what's in the bill, to then figure out, okay, it's not in the bill, then we're going to do regulations. Or it is in the bill, we may need to do amendments or make sure that the language works. And work through legislative session. So we'll see what happens over the next 77 days, I think, 76 days, around potential legislation and what that looks like. So we'll know quickly next steps on issues on that front. The easy lifts are things like an administrative guide. We are already working internally on that and making sure that that will get posted publicly. We had already started a work group on substantial modification, and then we stopped, and then we started again, and then we stopped. So we're ready to pick that back up, and certainly does not require any statutory changes to do that. So there are a handful of things that we will pick up and move quickly. Things that we'll be interested to see if it gets put into statute are things like the letters of intent, the mission review process, changes to that. And again, we're prepared to take it on even if it doesn't change in statute, but if it does change in statute, we'll address it that way. In terms of capacity, I think the biggest lift, I think most of these things we can do with existing resources. The biggest lift will be the coordinated effort with labor and commerce on workforce need. We do not have existing capacity. when I say capacity, I mean expertise. We really need somebody who can say, okay, great, labor and commerce say we need more widget makers. We need somebody who can translate that into an academic program and work with our colleges and say, wow, college A, B, and C, you're well poised to make widget makers. You already have some curriculum, you already have faculty, you already have lab space. Let's talk about creating an academic program that meets this workforce need. And so we really need somebody to coordinate with those two agencies to make that connection. It's one thing to make a list that says we need more people in these industries and fields. It's another thing to translate that into an academic program. So that's, I think, where if we struggle, it will be struggling in that kind of transactional information sharing.
Yes, Commissioner Agu, and then Commissioner Howe, and then Commissioner Dukes.
Sure, I have a couple specific questions, but just on that point, and let me just say this out loud, and I've been lucky to be part of some of those discussions with labor and with commerce on some of those, and this is also a little bit wrapped up in our state completion goals. So in some ways, a lot of this will proceed together. In my view, the industries are helpful to us as commissioners because when we have, we know there are certain industries where if we 10x the amount of programs that we had, we still would necessarily not hit harm because there's so much demand out there in the economy. Whereas in other discussions we've had to debate, is there enough demand to soak up the graduates that we are going to create? And so to me, I think even beyond the how do you make this into a program for us, at least knowing where to focus and where potentially certain debates are more or less intense, I think is really important. A couple of things I wanted to maybe just point out and say out loud, and maybe this is more to my fellow commissioners and folks watching. I'm looking at Section 2. There have been kind of one-off discussions about updating the state plan in this, which I expect either we'll do by ourselves or might be legislation to update by January 1 of 25. This probably is wrapped up with the update of the state completion goal, which of course is going to be, I think, central there. Also, the legislature in here asks, which I don't believe has been part of the process in the past, to have time to comment directly to us on that plan. I'm not sure if that's they've been part of the process in past. It sounds like it hasn't, or otherwise I don't think they would have made it. We have to kind of think that through. And then one other thing I wanted to name, this comes from actually related to one of the last reports in Section 5, a separate program development process for fully online programs, which I actually think may be a bigger lift than we think because of we're thinking about how do we maximize for out-of-state students. There are institutions that are hybrid. They do some online, some in person. So there are complications there that I actually think that we should very much recognize. And I had a question in Section 7 about the 33% threshold or standard. I was not in the room when they made this, in that they believe that this threshold might be too high or too low, or just literally that we should just examine it.
I don't know if the work group had an opinion necessarily on the definition itself. I think the answer is they wanted us to examine it. What it comes down to is there's lots of criticism that this is the wrong way to assess if a program has substantially been modified enough that merits a new review. We want institutions to change their coursework. We want them to stay consistent with industry. That's going to happen naturally. And because we have this 33% rule that sometimes becomes a burden for the campuses that are wanting to switch courses in and out, particularly for our community colleges when you have a 12 or 15 credit industry created credential. But that certainly is the case even at master's and graduate levels as well. So there's just general criticism, and I think we recognize it as staff, that this isn't the right way to say if a program has changed substantially enough that merits a new review on duplication, merits a circulation. So that's kind of the crux of, and again, this has been something we have wanted to examine since the start of the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, and we have not been able to catch our breath to get back to it.
Thank you.
I would just say that just the whole idea of 33% of what?
Exactly.
So it's something that cannot be calculated that way, right? So it's a lot of opportunity to make some changes there.
Commissioner Howe and then Commissioner Dukes.
All right. Well, I just want to say, just for myself, that when I read this legislative report, I was completely shocked by the detail and level of criticism that went into their remarks. I kind of was overwhelmed by the whole thing, I have to say. And for staff, there are a number of these things that we have been discussing with the staff for quite a while. For example, the definition of duplicity of programs and things like that. So I think that there is a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done based on this legislative report. And I will be anxious to see, with all of the budget problems facing the legislature, how much attention is really going to be given to what we need to get from the legislature. That's just a comment.
Commissioner Dukes?
No, my comments actually were articulated by the vice chair, so I'll stand down for now.
Great. Any other questions? Dr. Wright, did you want to make some comments?
Yes. First I want to begin by thanking work group co-chairs, Delegate Smith and Senator King, for their leadership and their unwavering support to this very important work. Under their leadership, as you know, 23 recommendations have been approved. I also want to extend gratitude to everyone that has contributed to this report and recommendations, including the legislative staff, Michelle Lambert and Stacy Goodman. Improving the academic program review process has been a top priority of mine since arriving at MHEC last May, I believe. Yeah. And, until May, I was on the other side of this process. Now I find myself on this side. So I think that from both of those vantage points, I see opportunities for improvement. Certainly, we fully support these recommendations, but we also believe that these recommendations are necessary but not sufficient for what needs to be done. So as an agency, we are committed to bring further equity, transparency, and efficiency into this process. So we will look at continuous improvement. We will implement these recommendations in a very timely manner, and then we'll continue to reform the process, collaborating with all institutions and all the stakeholders, and making sure we have the best possible academic program approval process, so that Marylanders have access to high-quality programs and lift up all Maryland institutions, particularly those that have been historically disadvantaged. So we look forward to these recommendations and next phase of this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rai. I would just add, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, that this was a very collaborative process. Each of the segments of higher institution, four-year colleges, two-year colleges, the MHEC leadership team, and of course the legislature were involved in these detailed 23 recommendations. And our expectation is that our partners, both in the legislature and in the higher education community, both two-year and four-year colleges, will continue to work with MHEC, which is the agency tasked with implementing these recommendations along with the legislature. But that this is very much a collaborative process. I also want to note that, as has been stated earlier, a lot of the recommendations are items that the agency was already working on and was interrupted by COVID, or for some of us new commissioners who have only been here 6 or 7 months, we already were starting to implement or had ideas about doing. So I think that it's very welcome feedback. I think that under Dr. Rai's leadership, this division led by Dr. Dow, the agency is well poised to implement these recommendations. And I think there's an appetite among all of us, commissioners and staff members, that we do want to improve the process, that we are driven by equity, fairness, transparency, consistency, that everybody in higher education in Maryland, starting with the people in this room, on the screen, around this horseshoe table, are interested in improving the process on behalf of Maryland students. Because at the end of the day, the reason that all of us are in this work and in this field is to provide opportunities for the students of this state. So thank you in advance, Dr. Rai and Dr. Dow, for what will be more work, but I think in collaboration with our partners will lead to better outcomes for our students. Commissioner, thank you. Commissioner, is that Tabor Stalen? I really can't see the screen.
I think it's Commissioner Howe.
Judge Howe,
It's
Commissioner Howe.
It's Commissioner Howell. By my comments earlier, it was not meant to be a criticism of this process. I think a tremendous amount of work has been done by our group and their group to come to a substantial number of recommendations that will improve everything for everybody. And it will just take time to get all these things done. But thank you to all the people who worked so hard to get this report out with its recommendations. And I look forward to future meetings where we discuss implementation. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Howe. Any other questions or comments before we moved on to our report from Dr. Schmertz from the Office of Research and Policy Analysis? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Dow.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that, and more to come. Thank you.
Dr. Schmertz and Dr. Lin, the floor is yours. We're very interested in learning about the 400-page plus performance accountability report that I spent much of yesterday reading.
Now you can offer suggestions.
Yes, yes, you can hear me. Yes, so as you indicated, Dr. Lin will be presenting, and I am here to help answer questions.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for having me here, and thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretary Ryan, thank you, Commissioners. And so my name is Yuxin Lin. I'm Associate Director of the Research and Policy Analysis. So here I present you today the 2023 Performance Accountability Report. So as you mentioned, it's a 400-page report, which is really bunky, but most of them are the institution's submission. And so in front of you, you have a 18-page short version of the report. So that is our MHEC institutional assessment report. So I will refer to the report frequently in my presentation because some of my graphs and charts might be small to be able to see. So I will refer that in your report. So if you want to take a closer look, and feel free to do that.
We would ask, correct me if I'm wrong, that we save questions for the end?
Yes, please. Yes, we're welcoming any questions, and please save the questions in the end. So before I start my presentation, so I want to give you some background and context about Performance Accountability Report and its framework. So Performance Accountability Report, or PAR, is an important mechanism by which public colleges and universities in Maryland are held accountable. And institutions in this report established and maintain performance standards. And so they can meet the institutional and statewide higher education goals. And in the report, they assessed the key metrics, and they also set the benchmarks toward the respective key metrics, and also they evaluate the progress they made toward they make toward to meeting the benchmarks. And so the current Performance Accountability Report framework is derived from the reform that happened in 2000. And since then, the report requirement is the same for community colleges and for the public for years. So can I actually switch to this one? Because it's easier for me to see. And for community colleges, they have the same metrics, but slightly different benchmarks, depend on their different missions and different priorities. And they updated every 5 years about benchmarks and metrics. And so the current benchmarks and metrics was updated lastly in 2021. But in contrast, public four-year colleges and universities have a slightly different metrics, and because they're serving different populations and they have a slightly different missions. And the current public four-year colleges and universities PAR framework is actually the mainstream effort of to fulfill the two sides of the agency's requirement. First is MHEC performance accountability requirement, and second is Department of Budget and Management requirement. That is called managing for result. So for the all 13 public four-year colleges and universities, they submit the same format of the metrics to both DBM and to us. And here is the brief summary of the performance accountability cycle. And so every year, spring and summer, MHEC issues guidelines on reporting for the upcoming cycle. And then in the summer and fall, institutions submit narratives reports to MHEC. And now in the fall and winter, so we perform analysis and prepare the statewide report. So that is a report you receive right now. And now in the winter, the commission reviews and approves the report. And after it's approved and report will submit it to the legislature per law. And so, so the report actually have the three important components. So first is the summary of the key indicators and how did the enrollment, retention, and completion outcomes evolve over time. And the second important component is institutional assessment. Are the institutions on track to meet their established benchmarks? And finally, every year, MHEC proposed several prompts for institutions to respond. So this year we have two questions. How do institutions identify long-term equity gaps? And second, how do institutions measure their long-term equity gaps? So I will start from the summary of the key indicators. So I want to remind you, so there is a lag between the year of the reporting and the year of the data collecting. So for the next few slides, the most current data available will be academic year 21 to 22. So I will start from the undergraduate full enrollment. So you can find the same chart on the page 5 and figure 1 on the report if this chart is too small to you to see. And so the enrollment decrease that start from the pandemic has been slowed down in the fall 2022. And total undergraduate enrollment decreased from 233,000 to 230,000 from fall 21 to fall 22, which is a 1.4% decrease. But last year, this decrease was 6%. And this decrease was majorly contributed by community colleges, which experienced a 2.7% decrease in last reporting cycle. And in comparison, public 4 years enrollment remains stable in 2022. Okay. But there are some bright side about undergraduate enrollment. So this chart you can find similarly on page 5, figure 2. So that is undergraduate enrollment disaggregated by race and ethnicity. So from the top to the bottom, the line represents the white, black, and other race and ethnicity student, Hispanic student, and Asian student. And as you can see, the undergraduate enrollment in Maryland public 4-year and community colleges stay diverse. And over the past 10 years, the proportion of Asian, Hispanic, and other race and ethnicity students keep growing. And the proportion of Black and African American students remains stable. So the next slide show the graduation rate for public 4-year institutions. So you can find the same figure on page 8 and figure 5. So we measure the graduation rate in 150% of normal program length, which is 6 years. And in track of the enrollment, we track students' 6-year graduation rate by cohort, the year when students first enter college. So because our most current available data come from the year 22. So if we backward by 6 years, the most recent cohort whose 6-year outcome is available is 2016 here. And as you can see, the 6-year graduation outcome has been improved compared to 10 years ago. However, the recent 3 cohorts has been experienced a decline or stop. And then minority students experience larger effect. The African American student 6-year graduation reduced by 1.9 percentage points, which is larger than other race ethnicity group. And that infers that racial gaps become wider during the pandemic. Next slide is a graduation and transfer rate for community colleges. So similarly, we track graduation rate and transfer rate by 150% of the normal program time, which is 3 years for community colleges. And similarly, we observe that graduation and transfer rate has been improved a lot compared to 10 years ago or 10 cohorts ago. But recently, in the recent 3 cohorts, the student experienced a stop or decline in their graduation and transfer rate. And African American student, again, was down by 1.9 percentage point, and which is the largest impact. And now I'm going to summarize the institutional assessment. So again, the institutional assessment summarizes the key performance metrics they established and compare that to the benchmarks. And you can find the detailed analysis in page 10 to 12. And I will start from the public 4-year institutions. And again, the public 4-year institutions have different metrics because they serve different students and have different missions. So there are no 2 institutions shares exactly same metrics, but I will select some of the metrics that reported by most of the institutions and show you the result. So start from the access. So in general, public 4-year institution. So in general, public 4-year institution meet or on track to meet the goals on access. So as the last slide shows, the undergraduate enrollment for public 4-year institutions remains stable and merely decreased by 0.4% in this reporting cycle. 11 institutions report measure on enrollment for minority economically disadvantaged students or enrollment of Pell Grant recipients, and 10 of them meet or on track to meet the goals. And 6 institutions report measure for STEM enrollment, and 4 institutions meet or on track to meet the goals. And next is success indicators. So in general, public 4 years were able to meet the goals in terms of the success metrics. But however, they still face challenges in equity issue. So 9 out of 11 institutions report measure for 2nd-year retention rate. 9 institutions met or were on track to meet the goals, but 2 of them did not meet the goals specifically for minority students. And the 12 institutions report the numbers for 6-year graduation rate. 7 of them meet or on track to meet the goals, but 3 of them did not meet the goals or on track to meet the goals specifically for minority students. So next is innovation indicators. So for innovation, we evaluate the institutional effort on improving innovation this year by measuring their licensure exam pass rate. So 8 institutions report on this measure, and most of them were able to maintain the consistent rate for this reporting cycle. For teaching and nursing, there is only 1 institution experienced the decrease in both nursing and teaching licensure pass rate. So next section is institutional assessment for community colleges, and the detailed analysis can be found on page 12 and 15. So again, all community colleges have the same metrics. Otherwise noted, the measures were reported by all 16 community colleges. So In access indicators, so community colleges still face challenges in enrollment. So as the previous slide shows, their credit enrollment decreased by 2.7% in last reporting cycle. Different from public four-year institutions, community colleges also serve an important role in provide all kinds of non-credit enrollment programs. And last reporting cycle, non-credit enrollment increased in community colleges, but fell behind the benchmarks. 13 of them missed the goals for the non-credit enrollment. So another indicators that can reflect the challenges they faced in enrollment and access is market share. So market share is basically a ratio, the proportion of enrollment contributed by community colleges, public four-years, and independent institutions. So in this reporting cycle, 11 community colleges report they experience a decline for the market share of the first-time and full-time student, and 13 community colleges report they have decrease in the market share for recent high school graduates. But there are some bright side on the enrollment, that is, community colleges strengthen their relationship with their local high schools. So in high school student enrollment, they experienced the increase in this year. So that is actually the reflection of the dual enrollment and early middle college student. And 13 of them meet the goals or on track to meet goals for high school enrollment. So next slide is the success indicators. So similarly, community colleges were able to meet or on track to meet the benchmarks for retention, but they faced the challenges to meet the goals for graduation and transfer rate this year. And also they faced the challenges from the perspective of equity. So 13 community colleges meet or on track to meet the benchmarks for retention, but 8 community colleges did not meet the goals or on track to meet the goals for Pell Grant recipients specifically or developmental students. And 9 community colleges did not meet or on track to meet the benchmarks for four-year graduation and transfer rate, and 13 of them did not meet the goals for developmental students especially. So next is innovation. So for community colleges, we measure their innovation from 2 sides. First is their employment after graduation, and second is the licensure exam pass rate. So in the last reporting cycle, community colleges actually see an improvement in employment after graduation. For example, 15 community colleges experienced an increase in employment rate within 1 year of graduation. And community colleges still serve as an important role in economic mobility. Student income 3 years after graduation is almost 3 times higher than what they can earn before enrollment. However, they face the challenges in maintaining their licensure exam pass rate. So in the reporting cycle, 11 institutions experienced a decline in the pass rate, and 10 of them missed the goals or are not on track to meet the goals for licensure exam pass rate. And the final component of this report and presentation is the responses to MHEC prompts. And you can find the detailed answers and questions on page 15 to page 18. So this year we asked 2 questions, and we asked several small questions under each question. So first is identifying long-term equity gaps. So first question is, what are the largest long-term equity gaps that existed in student access, success, and innovation in your institution? Please note the long-term equity gaps refer to the inequity that existed long before the COVID-19 pandemic and persisted over years. And second is, how are these equity gaps uncovered, discovered, identified at your institution, and how are they shared with your community? And the final question is, what interventions have been implemented to eliminate these gaps? And we have another set of questions. That is how you measure the equity gaps in your institution. So first, the small question is, how has your institution used to disaggregate data to identify equity gaps in students' educational opportunities and outcomes? And second one is, what stakeholders' engagement, such as students, faculty, staff, etc., is used to collect and review this data. And the final question is, does your institution set goals, benchmarks in regard to the elimination of the equity gaps? If so, what steps does your institution take to ensure accountability in meeting the established goals and benchmarks of the equity? There are a lot of questions and a lot of answers. Due to the time limitation, I won't repeat every single response here. So for the detailed summary of the responses and for the raw version of the answers, please refer to the report 15 to 18. And here I just want to highlight some of the key takeaways. So first, it is commonly mentioned that gaps in student success for racially or socioeconomically underrepresented students is the gaps that they experience the most. And those gaps are usually identified by disaggregated data and the campus climate surveys. And the Office of Institutional Research usually play a central role in collecting and disseminating the data. And these results are often shared within an institution's community, which includes administration, staff, faculty, and students. And finally, most institutions set benchmarks to eliminate equity gaps and implement various interventions to improve the equity. So this concludes my whole presentation. So in summary, the impact of COVID-19 on enrollment has been diminished, and there are still some ripple effect found in retention, graduation, and transfer rate. There are some disproportionately larger effect for minority students on some measures, but looking forward, undergraduate enrollment rebounds in 2023. So from our 2023 opening for enrollment, the data suggested that undergraduate enrollment recovered statewide by 4.1%. Another bright side is tuition and fee still remains stable in fall 23. So for the community colleges, the tuition and fee only grow by 2.5% for the in-state, in-district student and 2% for the in-state student in public four-year institutions. So let me remind you again, this is action item. So the recommendation, I will read it loudly. It is recommended that the Maryland Higher Education Commission approve the 2023 Performance Accountability Report and ask the acting secretary to forward it to the governor and the General Assembly as required by law. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lin, for an extremely informative presentation. This is a topic of great interest to this administration and to this commission in particular. And I commend MHEC for the two prompts that you asked with respect to equity gaps, looking into how you measure them and how you identify them and then measure them. So I'm sure my colleagues have questions. Commissioner Burnham, followed by Commissioner Serrano, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions. First, I'm just struck by the fact that this accountability report seems to apply only to the public institutions. And I wonder if there are any accountability measures in place at all for the independent colleges and universities, since they receive some state funds as well, as I understand it.
Sure. I am happy to answer that question quickly, and then I will defer the background introduction part to my supervisor, Dr. Schmerz. So short answer is no, we do not have that for independent institutions. And so Dr. Schmerz may be able to introduce more about the whole framework.
Sure. This report is guided by law.
Sorry, you faded out. We can't hear you now.
How about now?
Yes. Much better.
Okay. In short, this is a report that's driven by statute, and statute requires the public institutions report this. Through this mechanism, they're held accountable. Your broader question of are there other mechanisms by which we hold private institutions or state-aided independent institutions accountable? There are reports that come to mind are the cultural diversity report, which is something that they all participate in. But these kinds of metrics, this report is really solely dedicated by law for the publics only.
All right, thank you. My second question has to do with the finding of a declining market share for community colleges. given that tuition at the community colleges is much lower, that finding was a little bit surprising. It indicates that something more than cost of attendance or price of tuition is at play there. And I wonder if you have any insights from the reports as to what contributed to that decline.
Yeah, that is really a great question. We're still investigating the reason behind that. That is also really surprised the phenomenal for myself when I read the report, because as you understand the market share, the definition of the market share, it is contributed by public 4 years, community colleges, and independent institutions. So if community college is losing their market share, so on the other side of the table, so public 4 years and independent institutions are gaining their share.
Yeah.
So in that case, so we're still investigating why students lose their interest to community colleges, but they switch to public 4 years and independent institutions. But yeah, so that's a great question. So I myself definitely would like to investigate more on this. But I will defer the other part to Dr. Schmerz and see if she has any insight on that.
I have nothing really more to add other than you are correct. The denominator is all students going to college from a given service area. And so the way in which the market share is measured is for a service area's county. There is always a concern that this may be a data quality issue as well. So I would hate to have a smoking gun of something more than what may be afoot, which is right. Students are making choices because other opportunities are available that they may not have felt were afforded to them before. There may be stronger recruiting efforts happening with our public institutions as well as our state-aided independent institutions. But I agree with Dr. Lin that understanding that mechanism, and we are by no means alone in that. I'm sure the community colleges themselves are wondering what is going on with their depressing of their market share. That's an important variable for them. So great question.
Thank you.
Commissioner Serrano and then Commissioner Dukes.
So my question is more on like a couple of issues. I think one is like the affordability metrics. I guess, I mean, when I think of affordability, I think of like kind of debt at graduation, unmet student need, and then kind of tuition as a part of the family's income. How much of those factors are in here? It sounds like we have a little bit of it, but not. I mean, and is there an opportunity to include that within, like, if we're serious about looking at affordability metrics and we're trying to measure that from institution to institution, how much room is there to include other metrics that we might not be capturing now in the future?
Thank you for the question. To answer your question first is, yeah, we definitely have some metrics regarding the how much tuition you pay and how much financial aid distributed to the student. But as I mentioned, first is public 4-year institutions oftenly don't have the same metrics. So the reason those metrics was not summarized here is not because they didn't report the measures. It's just only few of them report, and it's probably they use different definitions, and it's really hard to summarize them in the single bucket. And another thing is we, as the state, as the research office and as a state agency, I think this affordability is a really important definitions, and we have to discuss about how we better define the affordability. Should we actually only look at the tuition and fees, or we need to look at how we actually define student needs and met needs and the financial aid received by students. So definitely there are some, and but we're happy to actually investigate more and try to summarize them as an indicator that can better reflect affordability. But for now, we majorly focus on Pell Grant students, proportion of Pell Grant recipients, and also we measure something like tuition and fees as a general, very rough indicator for that. So that's a great suggestion, and I would refer the rest of the part to my director.
So I think it's important to emphasize. So Commissioner Serrano, you asked a few good questions. One, the institutions will report what they choose as metrics. So I think what Dr. Lin is getting to is if only one or two institutions really takes that on as a metric of what they want to be held accountable to. Again, the public 4 years in particular, the Department of Budget and Management really drives their metrics, and we are a collaborator on that. The responsibility the commission could have in the future